inspiring day at the conference, and I was playing my voice messages, and I received several phone calls indicating 5 Oakland, California police officers had been shot, 3 fatally wounded. When I woke up this morning, I turned on the news, and the very first story that was on the news this morning was that a mother and 2 of her kids, young boys, were murdered here in Washington, D.C. You had the mayor of D.C. come out and talk about this tragedy and how sad it was. They interviewed the uncle, and he spoke about how when you hear of this virus, you say, oh, how sad. But when it happens to you personally, you think about how tragic it really is. 1 week prior to coming to this conference, I received a telephone call from a mother indicating her son had been gunned down on the freeway in the city of Richmond, California. And when I went over to talk to that mother, she was sharing with me her pain of losing her son. And she said he was a budding rap artist, someone who had had some brief incidents with law enforcement, but nothing serious. And he had just had a 1-year-old daughter that was born, and it transformed his life. He had started this rap career, and he had a CD that had just come out, and it was starting to sell. And someone took his life. She spoke about one of the tracks. He had dedicated a song to her titled, Who Am I? And in that song, he talked about how he wanted to transform his life and stop creating pain and misery for his mother. He spoke about the love that he had for his 1-year-old daughter, and how that daughter transformed him, and he realized that the path that he was on was not the right path. Also in that song, he asked the question, will I be forgiven for the sins of my past? Young man's life taken. On Tuesday of this week, received a phone call that another young man had been gunned down in the city of Richmond. His girlfriend went to the house, he opened up the door, and the man came in behind him, shot him in the neck and other parts of his body, and he died on the scene. Violence taking place all across America. In a former life, I worked as a paralegal, and one of my jobs in that law firm was to do temporary restraining orders and harassment orders. And I tell you, we were told that you can't get too emotional and too caught up in the interviewing of these women when you talk with them. Because if you get too personal, you get drawn in. And when I would interview these women that would come in and talk about being battered by their husbands or their boyfriends, I tell you, it's nothing nice. And what was so tragic in the training that I had received, that there was a law on the books in the United States that said that a husband could beat his wife with a rod as long as it was not as thick as his thumb. A husband could beat his wife with a rod as long as it was not as thick as his thumb. I tell you today, when you talk about the Department of Peace, when we look at all this madness that's occurred all across this country, I don't think there's any doubt that we need a Department of Peace. One of the things that I realized while I was here this week is that I'm not crazy. Amen. Because when I listened to those individuals from Challenge Day as they were speaking, when I listened to Ocean speak, a lot of the things that they were saying, I was sitting in the back thinking, yes, oh, what a confirmation. I'm on the right track in the work that we're trying to do in Richmond. But one thing I can say that we need to be clearly clear on is that we are all in this together. If we took a needle and we went around this room and we pricked every finger in here, that which would come out would be what color? Red. If any of you have a different color, we need to talk after the session. So what that says to me is that our destinies are inextricably bound. It doesn't matter what race, creed, or color you may be. We are all in this together. And in that vein, I want to put a shout out to our Native American brothers and sisters who may not be here by putting on a t-shirt. I had the privilege a couple of years ago to do an opening prayer for a celebration of the Department of Peace. And let me just say this, first of all, language is important. I think someone on this stage said that. Language is important. So what we have to do is this. When the Department of Peace legislation is passed, that has to be our language. It's when the Department of Peace, when this legislation is passed. When the legislation is passed, we will be able to go into these communities all across the United States and look at the root causes of this violence that's occurring in our city. I think the representatives from Challenge Day talked about what's real in the lives of these young men and these young women. Separation, isolation, loneliness, it's real. And many of what drive these young men and women is those feelings, that sense of loss that they have, that sense of not feeling that they belong. And out of that anger and that frustration manifests itself through violence. When the Department of Peace is created, we will be able to, all across America, work in neighborhoods in partnership with law enforcement to make sure that no young man would pick up a gun and do what he did to destroy those families on law enforcement. When the Department of Peace is created, we will be able to go in to the families of Oscar Navarro, a young man who had just gotten out of work. While I was going to visit my mother, I came upon a homicide scene. Oscar Navarro had just gotten out of work. He got out of his car as some young men was coming around the corner shooting at each other. The guy that was being shot at, he ducked. Oscar Navarro turned around and looked and see what was going on, and he got shot in the head. Young man, family, 3 kids. Violence in America. In the city of Richmond, California, a young man, 15 years old, he's more likely and he has more access to getting an assault weapon than an updated textbook. I'll say that again. In Richmond, California, a young boy, 15, 16 years old, he has greater access to getting an assault weapon than an updated textbook. And so this is a reality in many communities all across this country. So when the Department of Peace is formed, you will see a movement all across this nation going out to address those issues. When the Department of Peace is approved, we will then be able to work with those mothers. We will be able to work with those fathers. Because one of the things that I realized when I was doing domestic violence work was that we had back then a place where we could refer the women to. But there was nothing in existence to deal with the balance. When this legislation is approved, I think we would be able to transform America. We will be able to create a culture of peace all across this country. And I tell you, the question is asked, well, is it necessary? Do we need this? Well, you ask the family of those 5 law enforcement officers in California, do we need this? The question is asked, do we need this? Well, you ask the mother of that young man who was trying to turn his life around, do we need this? Question is asked, do we need this? When you ask those mothers, those wives, those girlfriends who are being battered by their loved one because they don't know how to deal with their anger and their rage. And so I submit to you today, it's not a question of if the legislation is passed. The fact of the matter is when the legislation is passed. Because I know I'm running short of my time. I'd like you to repeat after me, if you would. If you always do, what you've always done, you will always get. What you've always got. Live it loud. If you always do, what you've always done, you will always get. What you've always got. Sunday morning we in church, let's say it a little bit louder. If you always do, what you've always done, you will always get. What you've always got. Brothers and sisters, it's time to do something different. And that something different is to make sure that H.R. 808 is passed, that this legislation moves forward.